Have you ever wondered why you've studied English for years, learned thousands of words, and still can't speak naturally? I've met hundreds of students like that. They memorize endless vocabulary lists like movie scripts. But when someone asks, "What did you do yesterday?" they go silent. Not because they don't know, but because they can't activate what they've learned. I often say in my podcast, learning a language is like learning to breathe. You don't count every breath, you simply live with it. English works the same way. If you keep forcing yourself to learn more and more, without actually living in the language, you'll end up with a huge library of words that you never open. It's like owning every book, but never reading one. So what if I told you, you could become fluent in English with just 500 words? Sounds impossible, doesn't it? But it's actually the most realistic, efficient, and most human path of all. A study from Oxford University found that the 500 most common English words cover over 60% of daily conversations. And if you learn just 500 more, you can understand about 9 out of 10 everyday sentences. That means you don't need to master the whole ocean of English words. You just need to learn how to swim well in your own small bay. I remember meeting a student from Brazil. He said, "Lucas, I know more than 3,000 English words. But I can't say 3 sentences." I smiled and said, "All right, let's try talking using only 200 of your most familiar words." We started with simple ones: go, do, have, get, want, need, good, people, time. Nothing complicated. But after a few minutes, something changed. He started talking more. Less afraid, less overthinking. He was finally communicating. That's when I realized, fluency isn't about quantity. It's about connection. How deeply you link yourself with the language. You don't need to memorize. You need to own. To own a word means you can use it flexibly in real life. Take the word make. You don't need to remember it means to do. You just say, make breakfast, make time, make a mistake, make friends. Each small phrase is like a brick. And over time, you build your own house of fluency. In another episode of my podcast, I said, humans don't learn words, we learn patterns. Neuroscientists call them fluency pathways. Neural roads built through repetition. At first, speaking feels like walking through mud, slow, heavy, tiring. But as you repeat, again and again, your brain starts clearing the path. Eventually, you don't think anymore, you just speak. Like driving, playing piano, or running. Fluency, in truth, is simply habit made automatic. Now imagine this. Tomorrow morning, you wake up. You don't worry about memorizing words or grammar. You just open your notebook. Look at 10 familiar words. And write a short paragraph about yesterday. Today was a good day. I got up early. I had breakfast with my family. Then you read it out loud 3 times. Only 10 minutes. But in that moment, you've planted a small seed of fluency. People often underestimate small things. They chase difficult lessons to feel progress. But our brains don't work that way. When you learn something simple, clear, and repeat it regularly, your brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter that makes you feel satisfied. Every time you finish a small goal, your brain says, "Good job, do it again." That's why the 500-word method is so powerful. It makes you enjoy learning. And when you enjoy learning, you stay longer. I once had a student from Korea. She told me, "I'm always afraid of pronouncing words wrong. So I never speak." I asked her to say just one short sentence a day. Not perfectly, but honestly. 3 months later, she stood in front of the class and told a story in English. Her voice still trembling, but her eyes shining with pride. That's true fluency. Not the absence of fear, but the courage to speak despite it. I know that for many people, learning English feels like a lonely journey. There are days you feel slower than yesterday. See others improve faster, and want to give up. I understand that feeling. But trust me, you don't need to run. You just need to keep walking. Steadily, one small step at a time. Fluency isn't a race. It's a collection of small victories. The moment you understand a movie line, follow a podcast, or order your meal without fear, those tiny wins accumulate, and one day you realize you can speak without thinking. That's when English stops being just a language and becomes part of who you are. You don't learn to speak. You speak to live. So start today. With just 10 words. No pressure. No competition. Let this journey become a gentle part of your everyday life. Like sipping morning coffee. Or walking under the soft afternoon light. A year from now, you'll look back and smile. Wow, just 500 words. And I can already speak to the world. When you stop and think about it, what makes someone sound truly natural when speaking English? It's not the perfect accent. It's not having a massive vocabulary. It's the natural flow between words and emotion. Native speakers don't speak word by word. They speak in groups, like a rhythm, a continuous stream. They don't say just take, they say take your time, take care, take a seat. Their language isn't a formula, it's a melody. And you can do the same. If you're willing to change the way you learn. Don't start by stuffing your brain with endless word lists. Start with your story. If you go to work every day, learn to talk about that. If you love cooking, begin with familiar words like cook, taste, chop, recipe. Because when vocabulary connects with real life, your brain remembers it faster and deeper. Language only comes alive when it touches your true memories. I remember once, a podcast listener named Maria wrote to me. She said, "Lucas, I listen to your podcast every morning while making coffee. Now every time I hear the sound of boiling water, my brain automatically switches to English." I laughed, but that's exactly the secret. When you repeat language in familiar moments, your brain starts to treat it as a natural part of your life. Let English appear in those small moments. In the morning while brushing your teeth. At noon while walking. In the evening while washing the dishes. Don't study. Don't force yourself. Just say a few short, easy sentences. For example, while cooking, simply say, "I'm cooking dinner. I'm cutting the onion. It smells good." That's it. Short, simple, but it's living English. Many people believe learning English must be serious. But that belief often makes them forget the most joyful part. Playing with the language. If you treat each sentence like a small experiment, a piece of music, a tiny painting, you'll stop being afraid of mistakes. You'll see yourself as creating, not memorizing. Once, during a workshop, I asked everyone, if you could only learn 10 words today, which ones would you choose? One person said, love. Another said, work. And someone smiled and said, coffee. We all laughed. And then we spent half an hour creating stories around the word, coffee. In just 30 minutes, they spoke more English than they had in an entire week of class. That is the power of connection. When language touches emotion, it stops being a lesson. It becomes a memory. I know, learning English can sometimes make you feel lost. There are days when you hear others speak so fluently, and whisper to yourself, I'll never sound like that. But you know what? The person you admired today once sat exactly where you are. Hesitant, trembling, afraid of mistakes. What made them different wasn't talent. It was patience, the kind that grows quietly through small efforts. They didn't try to leap over the mountain. They just kept walking, one steady step at a time. One day, one paragraph, one honest sentence. That's all it takes, repeated, day after day. And slowly, the language begins to blend with their breathing. Learning English is a lot like growing a garden. At first, you only see empty soil, nothing seems to happen. But you still water it. You still care for it. Then one morning, you notice a sprout, a leaf, a soft green life. Fluency is just like that. It arrives quietly, in the moments you speak without realizing. In the sentences you understand without translation. If you want the real secret to speaking English fluently, it's not hidden inside any textbook or app. It lives in your small daily habits. 5 minutes in the morning, 5 at night, a short podcast on your way to work, a tiny story you tell yourself before bed. Little by little, you'll notice English no longer feels like a subject. It becomes a companion, a friend who opens doors to the world, and sometimes helps you understand yourself better. Now imagine this. A year from today, you're sitting in a cafe. The wind is soft. Your cup of coffee is steaming. And in your ears, you hear your own voice. Speaking English naturally, clearly, without fear. You smile. Not because you've become perfect, but because you know you've walked through the fear. And that is the true freedom language gives us. Ending. Thank you for spending your time with SpeakEasy English today. If you felt inspired, leave a small comment, tell me what you learned. Because maybe your story will help someone else find the courage to begin. Keep your voice, keep your rhythm, and keep speaking, even if it's just one sentence a day. The world needs to hear you more than you think.